Hey everybody, Cole here, and today I'm going to be reviewing comedy. Today I'll be discussing comedic podcasts and their relationship to marginalized identities. I'm not here to judge whether or not a specific podcast is good or bad, only to highlight the ways that comedy can often fail certain marginalized identities and how best to avoid it. As a reminder, I am not the god of comedy, and this is not the final say on what is or is not funny. It is just my own opinions on observations I have made about this particular topic, more specifically about comedy and audio dramas and podcasts in general. Comedy podcasts are extremely hard to do, being a mainly audio medium. A lot of comedic podcasts have to rely on situational comedy, because slapstick doesn't really translate super well. I have heard that the Orbiting Human Circus is extremely good at slapstick, though I have not heard it. And we do have things like Victoriosity or Wooden Overcoats, which uses a mix of showing and telling for its comedy. Unfortunately, many podcasts these days fall victim to what I believe is the worst type of comedy, which is the invalidation of marginalized identities. Yes, there is a reason this is being released on the same day as my Fall of the House of Sunshine review. So, there's this concept in comedy called punching down, and its counterpart, punching up. This punching is generally referring to the cultural impact of a joke. Someone of a higher status or position making fun of someone of a lower status. Punching up is the idea that humor should appeal to everybody. It's generally about finding the absurd flaws of a larger system of power. So, let's talk a little bit about the general history of representation in media before we can get down into the weeds of podcasting. Both the Hollywood Production Code from 1930 to 1968 and the Code of Practices for Television Broadcasters from 1952 to 1983 prohibited positive descriptions of homosexuality and homosexuals or anything that promoted the lifestyle. So, most early instances of on-screen gay people were child molesters, victims of trauma or abuse, drag queens, or a mix of all of them. Not great. Once those restrictions were more or less lifted, we wouldn't really see any positive representation until the mid to late 90s. People of color were often banned from performing on screen. Segregation was still a huge thing, even after 1954. Media often used blackface and painted actors as a substitute for having actual people of color on set. Kind of like how podcasts can get away with being fake diverse because while they have a lot of non-white characters, their entire cast of voice actors is a bunch of white folk. Even once we do start to see black-centric movies, they're generally centered around slavery or a collective racial trauma. Most black roles were subservient ones like house cleaners or slaves or postal workers. They were portrayed as stupid and inferior, lazy, ruthless schemers. People with disabilities were often and still are portrayed as pathetic or evil. They were a force to be laughed at or a burden on a family member. The disability was used as a hook to draw in the audience. They weren't accurate or fair depictions and only worked to vilify disabled people and spread ignorance about the nature of that disability. It's also pretty fair to say that podcasting and radio shows in general have followed a lot of these same trends. Basically, what I mean by all of this is for most marginalized people, like disabled people or people of color, we don't really get a whole lot of screen time already. So when we are on screen, or in your headphones, the majority of our mentions are transphobic or racist or calling us broken and mangled, or don't accurately represent who we are. So we get used to that representation because it's all we have. But all that representation is negative. But it's all we have. But it's all negative. But it's all we have. But you see where I'm going with this. Anyways, I highly recommend the documentary The Problem with Apu. It's written by the comedian Harry Kondubola. It discusses the character Apu from The Simpsons, who for a while was really the only South Asian character to appear on television. This comedian discusses the blessing, having a smidgen of representation, and its curse, the prejudices it ingrained in the American nation. Now, I'm not saying that you can't joke about a specific identity. There are plenty of aspects of marginalized life that are funny and also don't beat people down. In the same way that I believe someone who is of a specific identity will be the best to play a character of that identity, I also believe that they're going to craft the funniest joke about that particular topic. They have the knowledge of all the bullshit that goes on in their life to find the true humor in it, as well as the ability to point out the inherent power struggles they face. That's why, say, when a podcast makes fun of a disabled woman and how crooked and bent out of shape her legs are, it's less funny than when a person of color pokes fun at the fact that a 40-year-old white woman named Stephanie is probably real into fighting the patriarchy, but is also somehow super racist. Speaking of, my childish review is coming up in the next few weeks, so keep an eye out. So, let's say you are a white person who would like to write about a black character, but you have zero experience doing or living their life. Congratulations, you're expanding your horizons. Here's what you do. First, you hire a black writer who is comfortable with the topic. And or you reach out to these wonderful folks called sensitivity consultants. Writing about cultures and identities that are not your own can be tricky, and oftentimes it's easy to find aspects of that culture that are traumatic and not necessarily funny to the people of that group. These consultants are here to help you avoid any unfavorable and unkind jokes that you might be thinking of adding to your show that would turn off any other potential listeners. They're here to help you grow out of the two-dimensional caricatures of representation that we are so used to seeing. Comedy, I think, is best done when it's empathetic and kind. It, along with satire, works best as a weapon of the powerless against the powerful. It should be used as a tool for the radicalization of common beliefs, and you should be using humor to point out the inherent flaws in a larger power structure. Challenge the logic of conventional norms, or challenge what you know and step outside the comfort zone. Minorities have spent so many years being the butt of cruel jokes just all throughout history. Take a look at your world and expand your own viewpoints to realize that there are better things to discuss and joke about than how much you can hurt someone who has already been beaten down. Think critically about the things you are joking about and realize the impact it can have on other people. If you want to learn more about mixing race and comedy, watch the 1974 black comedy western Blazing Saddles, and then go watch You Couldn't Like Blazing Saddles Today by Infernaut. It is a fantastic, in-depth review of how the movie altered the comedic landscape of its time and influenced black representation in Western films moving forward. Blazing Saddles is a great example of a movie that punches up, despite the fact that it handles the trauma and abuse of non-white people. It poked fun at the greed, racism, and ignorance of the white man, as well as deconstructs the negative and extremely racist tropes found in comedy and the cowboy genre in general. So podcasts in general have really only been around for, say, the last 15 years or so. As of this year, over 59% of podcast listeners are white, and unsurprisingly, more than that percentage make up its content creators. I swear I would have better statistics, but it's impossible to find a specific and reliable data on content creator demographics specifically, partly because of the sheer number of podcasts that get released per year. It is, however, undeniable that there is not much room for people of color within the community, considering the past trends and the general hellscape that it is for people of color in online cultures. It also isn't too hard to take a look at the top 10 podcasts on iTunes right now and break down their creator demographics. Hey everyone, Cole here. Future Cole here. I wasn't gonna do this, but I'm procrastinating, so I'm gonna do this. Let's take a look at the top 10 fiction podcasts on Apple right now. It is currently 4 a.m, on Thursday, April 30th. I need to go to bed, but fuck it. First up, we have Lighthouse clocking in at number 1. That is a majority white cast and crew. Next up, we have Welcome to Night Vale at number 2. They have gotten a lot better in the years of having characters of color, but it is also white creators. Clocking in at 3, we have the Left Right Gang. This one is actually diverse. It's Tessa Thompson's podcast. It does have some white writers, but fuck it. I'll take it. After that, clocking in at 4 is Next Stop, which is a multitude podcast. While they do have people of color on cast, it is still white creators. After that is Imagined Life, Again, not diverse. At 6 is the Adventure Zone. Need I say more? Clocking in at 7 is the No Sleep Podcast, which is still white creators. Clocking in at number 8 is 6 Minutes, which is actually diverse. It took a little bit of hunting, but yeah, there's definitely people of color. Clocking in at 9 is the Full Body Chills, and I literally could not figure it out. They do not have a proper website set up. Their website doesn't actually have any sort of writer. There's no social media presence. There's no links to anything besides the episodes and their transcripts. I say transcripts because it's really just the script. There's no like any indication of sound effects or music or intro, outro or anything. It's also by the way, it also has a really bright flashing light on the main page, so if you're going to go to their homepage, just seizure warning, beware. And clocking in at 10, we have Blood Ties, which, as you can guess, is not diverse. We've done it. 3 out of the top 10 podcasts on Apple charts is kind of diverse. We've made it. We're here in the world. I'm gonna stop screaming about this and send you back to past Cole, who has much kinder words to say about this than I do. We have a responsibility as people to improve upon our society. Not only do we need to make space for non-white content creators, we also need to be aware of the impact comedy has on their subjects. Punching down is just going to leave others with black eyes and bloody bruises, but punching up is going to dismantle the societal norms that have kept us at odds and will ultimately bring us closer together. I believe it is possible to be funny and also kind. It is a type of humor that for many is hard to do, but ultimately it's going to appeal to more people, and even more importantly than that, it's going to hurt less. If you want something to read, go check out Knock Yourselves Out by Ben Schwartz, who is not the guy from the Sonic movie. Trust me, I checked. It is an interesting look at the concept of punching and how both sides, the powerful and the powerless, explore comedy and power structures of their time. It's not a perfect article, but I really enjoyed how it laid everything out and feel it's a great starting point. Alright, that is all I have for now, but I will leave you with these final thoughts. Humor is important, both to the people who write it and to the people who listen to it. We have to be aware of the power we hold over people and of the power we have to fix it. Thank you all so much for listening, and as per usual, you can find all of the links below. Thanks again, and take care of yourself. Bye.